Lighting my video projects has been one of the biggest banes of my existence for quite some time. Heck, even rigging up the lighting here in this little home YouTube studio is often a struggle, and it has cost me about a quarter of a kidney to get here. But now here enters the new AMARAN 60D and 60X from Aputure. Tiny, mobile, and cost-effective lighting options that might just be the perfect lights for your kit. But the question is, are they any good? Let's get into it. So there are two new lights added to the Aputure AMARAN lineup, the 60D and the 60X. The D is the daylight only version and the X is a bicolor, with the 60D being a bit brighter and the 60X giving adjustable temperature between 7200 Kelvin and 6500 Kelvin. Spoiler alert, these things are awesome, but be sure to stick around to the end because there are a few downsides that I'd like to be sure that you are aware of. But first, a disclaimer. Aputure did send me these lights to test out, but they have no say in what I say, and they don't get to see this video before you do. With that out of the way, let's take a look at what you get for your $170 investment if you decide to pick one of these up.
What's in the box?
Right away, you get this nice little portable foam carrying case, and off the bat, that already differs from a lot of the other budget options, even those in the Aputure family, such as the 100 and the 200D, which just come with a box. You of course also get the light itself, a mini reflector, the AC power cable and the AC power supply. You also get a mounting pin to rig it up to a standard light stand. And you also have this nifty little dual NPF battery plate, but more on that in a moment. They also each feature a standard Bowens mount on the front, so you can use any of the various modifiers such as a softbox, a Fresnel, barn doors, you name it, you got it. To operate the light, you've got this nifty little power switch on the back and a little control knob on the left. Twisting the knob gives you fine control over the brightness, and then pressing the knob will jump up in 20% increments, all of which are displayed on a little LED screen on the left. Getting into the review, let's first talk about brightness. At 65 watts each, it certainly isn't as bright as something like the 120D, but of course that is to be expected. Even still, it does have plenty of power for such a small light. The 60X gives about 2300 lux at 1 meter, while the 60D gives about 3300 lux. And rather than just rattle off those numbers, let's take a side-by-side comparison of each at its peak brightness. Now you can clearly see here that the 60X is very slightly dimmer than the 60D, and the 60D at peak brightness is about the brightness of the 120D at about 80 to 85%, which I would say is pretty good. For those curious, this talking head shot is being shot with the 60D at 80% brightness. Now the next most important thing to consider when choosing a light is of course color accuracy. Aputure is known to have great color accuracy, which is measured by CRI and TCLI. And without getting too much into the weeds of what those metrics are, just know that you typically want to have a light that is at least 90 in either of those measurements. Good news is both of these lights are rated at 96, so you don't have to worry about fixing any strange color casts in post like you might with some cheaper lighting that you would pick up on something like Amazon. Okay, so what about the bicolor option? Well, the 60X bicolor option differs in two key ways. First, as I mentioned earlier, it's not quite as bright, which is to be expected. So while the 60D is a little bit brighter, if you do have the need to change the color temperature, the 60X is definitely dope. It features that same control knob on the left, but in order to change the temperature, you simply click and press, and then that will bring you into the option to change the temperature. Me personally, I would go for the 60D due to its increased brightness. So what makes these things stand out? Well, of course, the first things first is the size. These lights themselves are a tiny little 4x4x4 cube. Not only is the light super portable, but you also don't have to carry around some huge control box. Compare this to something like the 120D Mark II, one of the most popular video lights and the one that I've been using for about the last 2.5 years, and you have this massive control box that you have to have plugged in order to power the light. Instead, you just have this normal sized AC brick and everything is controlled on the light itself. The 60D can also be controlled by the Sidus Link app, which gives you options of 8 different lighting effects such as paparazzi, fireworks, lightning, and of course you can also control the light with your phone wirelessly. So from a portability standpoint, you have the size of the light itself, much smaller than any comparably priced or comparably powered light. You have this nifty little carrying case, which is something that you don't typically get out of something this price point either. And one of the things that really makes this thing stand out are the power options. On the opposite side of the LCD screen, you have this nifty little V-mount quick release. Great, so now you must be thinking I have to go out and buy a super pricey V-mount battery. And the good news is, no, you don't. You also have the included NPF battery adapter, so you can use any of those monitor batteries that you have lying around to power this puppy. And honestly, that is such a nice little feature that sets this thing apart. You have the similarly priced AMARAN 100 and 200D that do not have a battery solution. The Godox SL60 also doesn't have a battery option, so you'd have to go with something like the Godox SLB 60W, which costs about $350. And I'm sure y'all will correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but you basically won't find another portable option for anything that's like this anywhere close to that $170 price tag. And that's what makes these such a great addition to your lighting kit, regardless of who you are. Sure, you could set up your YouTube channel with these things, but really the possibilities are endless. Say you're shooting a music video, you could easily rig a couple of these right above your talent for a nice little hair light, or if you're a portrait photographer, you can have your assistant hand hold these bad boys with a little light dome mini, and you're super nimble and easy to move around. Okay, so what are the downsides? Well, first things first is build quality. Of course, you have to skimp somewhere if you're gonna get the price point so low, so they've opted for building these things out of plastic. The build quality feels great, don't get me wrong, but if you were to be throwing these around in flight cases, maybe they're not gonna be lasting forever. But heck, for the price, you could buy one, break it, and buy another one, and it's still cheaper than a lot of similar options. Another very small issue that I have is that I wish that there was a larger handle for easier and more accurate tightening. This would allow you to be a little bit smoother with adjusting that tilt position. Now, it's not super clunky by any means, but it definitely could be a little bit better. Next, while you do have the app for control on your phone, I'm personally a much bigger fan of using the Aputure remote that comes with my 120D. There's been countless times where I'm using my phone for something else, and I love having that dedicated remote, so you don't have to always be using things on your phone. Another thing I'm really not a fan of is the included mini reflector. Honestly, it's kind of bunk. There's this big hot bright spot in the middle, which isn't particularly useful in my mind. The older reflector that you would have gotten with the 120D is a lot more pleasing and gives a nice even fall off throughout. Okay, so let's talk about noise. Typically, cheaper lights like these, such as the Godox SL60, or even in the Amaran lineup like the 200D, you'll have a ton of fan noise that kind of makes these lights honestly unusable in many situations. Luckily for these, this is not actually a downside. The fan noise has never been an issue, and it is super quiet. Okay, so who should buy these? I already mentioned that if you're just getting started with a YouTube channel or you don't have a really large budget, I really think that this is a perfect solution for you. But even better than that, if you're a freelance filmmaker and you want to add a couple of additional lights to your kit for fills, hair lights, or just something that's easy riggable, you can have a little accents that are out of the way and easy to hide from your shot, I'd say you absolutely can't go wrong with picking up a couple of these tiny little powerhouses. All right, so I hope this makes your research or purchasing decision a little bit easier. YouTube thinks that you'll like this video next, so let's see if they're right. Peace.